combination of music, and he's really gifted in speaking. And so he's going to be leading the little introductory to each lesson. And then we have a little outlines and things that we follow for the class. So what we're going to do is have a combination class until we determine how many people want to join. Now we don't have any sign-up sheets or anything like that because we're not here at the church to do that. But we'll have a Zoom meeting at 1 o'clock on October 1st. And we can also have people come to the session here. What? Oh yeah, 1:30. I keep forgetting that we moved it to 1:30 so we would have enough time for everybody to eat lunch and settle in. So 1:30, but you'll be getting some things about it every week. And everything that you need to know is on unity.org. I have a special little section there on unitydenton.org. On Sunday mornings, Linda Yates leads a Course of Love class, and I think she's here. And are you still meeting at the Prairie House? Okay. So at 9:30, they have a room, I believe, at the Prairie House, and they are still meeting. And all the information about that is on the website. And on the fourth Sunday of each month, Dory Gare leads a very relaxing, very energizing Qigong class. So I would invite you to just give yourself a little treat and attend that class. And we have a very active prayer session every Wednesday evening. We're getting lots of good results from our prayers. Prayers do work. Boy, am I convinced of that now after seeing some of the results that we're having from the prayer sessions. So now I'm going to go into my talk. Are you recording this? Okay. And I'm talking about, for the last 6 months, I've been talking about how we can get through this time period. And I thought for sure it would be over in June. Then I thought for sure it'd be over in July. I thought for sure by now we'd be back together in our sanctuary. It has lasted a lot longer than I think any of us thought it would. So now we're starting our 7th month of being isolated here and not at the church, although I have passed by a lot of churches whose parking lots are full. So what we're waiting for is our streaming. And Bev and Joe Collins have been working really hard on getting it all set up, and we're projecting that by October is our big key month, that we'll be ready to have a streaming service where you can actually have a view of me at the podium and the musicians. The music will come through clear where they don't have to get up and sit down. And, I think people can connect a whole lot easier, and people can come into the sanctuary if they want. So we're kind of like moving into a more normal church service in the other room. And so it's going to be a transition time, and I think we're going to enjoy it a whole lot better than what we're doing here. But we're going to keep Zoom going for classes until we know that we're totally through the whole time period. And then we may keep it anyway because there's certain people in other cities that want to keep connected to us, so through Zoom, and they can't come to the church. So we may continue Zoom until we see that it may not be needed. So the longer we have this time period, I've noticed that people are beginning to be stressed out. They're more, it's like, what are we going to do? Is it going to go on forever? There's a lot of stress out there. And then I have heard of so many people, because I know I get emails and phone calls, and we have a long prayer list of things that are going on in people's lives. And if you don't watch it, stress can get to you. You either get depressed or your body starts to reflect everything that's going on in your thoughts, your feelings. And high blood pressure can result because you might get all upset about what's going on in your life if you don't watch what you're doing and you don't start to meditate and pray every day. All of this time period can get the best of you. And that's why I've been talking every week about having a space of tranquility in your life. Doesn't that sound good? Have a space of tranquility in your life where you can rest, relax, let go, breathe in. You can take 10 minutes out from the world, and it's good if you could take 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the evening, 10 minutes at night. And then anytime you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm very upset at what's going on in the news. I'm very upset what's going on in my life. I don't like what's going on in the world. You know, you need a break, and that's the opportunity that this time period provides for us. It's a chance to get to know who you are as a spiritual being and take a break from all this stuff that's going on in life, whether it's in the world or whether it's in your own life. And then during this time period, there's a lot of beginnings and endings. And, you know, that can be disturbing. Your job may have come to an end. There's a lot of people who are forced to live together that have decided this isn't a very good living situation. And then divorces are starting to crop up. There's a lot of things going on. And a lot of people are starting to have physical problems and challenges. And that's just a natural reaction to people when they can't adjust to what's going on in life. You start to have a lot of physical problems and depression. And I've talked to a lot of people who can't sleep through the night. And what I think is interesting is that there's always a chance to learn something during these time periods. And all through history, people have had uncertainty. We have just been really fortunate in our country that we've had a long space of feeling secure, relatively secure. And this time period where we have a virus coming through that has caused people to be upset and wondering if they're going to get it. And it's closed down a whole bunch of restaurants who've gone out of business. It's closed, we all know there's a lot of closures. A lot of stores cannot deal with it, so they've closed their doors. But there's always an opportunity during this time period to do things. And there's always going to be change. And there's a lot of change right now here all at once. I know in the Bible, Jesus said, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See, and here's the thing. See that you are not alarmed. Now, why would he say that? You're talking about wars and you're not supposed to be alarmed. What he means is, do not worry. There's a place of security within you. All that you need is within you. So no matter what goes on in life, I'm going to repeat that. See that you are not alarmed. I think we need to remember that. Don't be alarmed. There's a spiritual beingness within you, this loving energy that's within you that will guide you, that will direct you, that will take care of you. And that's the space and that's the opportunity we have during this time period to connect and to get to know who we really are as a spiritual being. So what do you do if you find yourself experiencing challenging situations? Well, a lot of people, they resort, as you know, and maybe you've done it in the past, to drugs and alcohol and reckless behavior. They just want to get their mind off the situation, but then they find themselves in deeper trouble than ever. It's time to use a little wisdom, or you try to do things to keep your mind occupied and off of the challenges that are going on in your life. I love the quote by Joseph Campbell. Opportunities to find deeper powers within ourselves come when life seems most challenging. I'm going to repeat that. Opportunities to find deeper powers within ourselves come when life seems most challenging. And I think that is so true. And also, Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich was a life-changing book for so many people. It's one of those life-changing books. I know that my late husband, Dean, it started him off on the spiritual path. Is that very first book, Think and Grow Rich. And when you stop to think about it, is that how you grow rich? Is by thinking? No, it's by going within. And that's what he's really stressing, because Napoleon Hill was a spiritual person. He admitted that at the end, but he was always encouraging people to rise above their circumstances, no matter what's going on. And one of his, I have 2 or 3 of his quotes, and I used to go through that book. I used to have classes on that book. I used to have notebooks and all kinds of things based on that book. But here are 2 or 3 of his quotes. Every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. And it may be hard to realize that when you're going through an adversity. He also said, opportunity often comes disguised in the form of misfortune or temporary defeat. And I think some of us have been through situations. In a little while, I'll share a situation I went through personally where you go through a situation that looks so horrible, but the end result is so good. And I think if you look back at some of what you call a misfortune, you'll see that that misfortune led you on a path that ended up being so good for you. Most people, here's another quote, most great people have attained their greatest success just one step beyond their greatest failure. And then I'm going to end with one. There's so many good quotes. No man is ever whipped until he quits in his own mind. So it's always in our mind where the biggest battle is fought. You can either give up in your mind or you can accept some possibilities coming up. It's all this expectation that you have in your life. So there's a lot of people in history that have gone through very insecure times. The one I love the most is the story of Joseph in the Bible. And it came to mind when I saw Lowell's granddaughter play in the play about the Prince of Egypt. And what a wonderful story that is for so many reasons, because Joseph was gifted with dream interpretation, which turned out to be very bad for him, because when he did his dream and explained his dream to his brothers, they got jealous because they already knew he was a favorite. In the dream, he should not have shared this. They were all bowing down to him. There was, I think, a lack of wisdom there. But it led him to his life's purpose. And so they put him in a pit. And I think that just stands for sometimes how we end up. We end up in a pit in our life because we made a mistake. And we don't think there's any way out to crawl out of that pit. But his brothers were able to sell him to the Egyptians. And then he ended up marrying a woman. And then I think we're all familiar with the story. Some people erroneously reported to the Pharaoh that he was seeing other women, and he got in a lot of trouble. It didn't happen, but he ended up in jail. Well, that looks like a place of misfortune that you could never. Who wants to be in jail for something you didn't do? And then he was able to interpret the Pharaoh's dream, and in the end, he was able to save his family during a time of famine. And I love this verse, man meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. So sometimes we go through those pits in our life, those situations in our life, we see no way out. But as long as you just keep on keeping on within yourself, keep on opening up to spirit, it's a chance to get to know yourself better. And I know that it's sometimes we just kind of sail through life when things are just kind of like on an even keel. We may not really like our job all that much. We may not really like this or that. But when something gets taken away, that's when we find our biggest spiritual quest beginning. And I think that's one of the things that happens when we lose things in our lives, or when we lose security or lose hope for the future, or we don't like what's going on in the outer world. Go to the inner world. There's a lot of good there in the inner world and a lot of opportunities. A lot of people, when they lose a job, they find out that it opened the door to a better job and a better situation. So there's always beginnings and endings. The ending opens up to a new beginning. It always happens. If you're in a divorce, it opens up to a new life and new opportunities. I know that there's a lot of closures going on with business, but there's a lot of new businesses that are thriving. Computers have created new job opportunities. There's a lot of internet selling going on because people don't feel safe going to the store. So there's a lot of people profiting on internet sales. I cannot imagine how much money Zoom is making, because I never heard of Zoom until all this started. And now people are using Zoom to teach with classes and things like that. So there's a lot of computer opportunities out there. There's a lot of ways to make money in so many different avenues. And sometimes people think, well, I'm too old to start over, you know. Well, it's never too late. I was at the thrift store and I shared this online on Facebook, but some of you probably didn't see it. Um, One of my favorite authors was Phyllis Whitney. She was a mystery author, but she would always put in interesting things about the places that she was at, and she would bring in the history of the place. So not only were you trying to figure out who did what, you know, usually killed somebody or whatever in a murder mystery, but you would learn a whole lot about those places that these events took place. And so I used to read her books in the 90s, and I saw this, and I'll hold it up. It's Phyllis Whitney, and I love the cover. I saw this at the thrift store, $3 book, and it's called Amethyst Dreams. And I just drawn to it. And she talks about amethyst, and she said, if you, and I don't know if this is true, so I'm just throwing this out here, just as a curiosity thing. Maybe somebody can enlighten me on this, but she supposedly researches all this really well. But she says that if you put a geode that's been cut in half, there's an amethyst by your bed at night, you'll have dreams about the future that are accurate and true. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. Some of you out there that are into that kind of thing, maybe you can tell me if that's true or not. That's why this book is called Amethyst Dreams, because she solved some of the mysteries through an amethyst. And I think that was interesting. But I got curious about her, and I had not read this book. So I looked up, and she had written this book in 97. And at the time, she was 94 years old. And so then I wondered about her life. And I looked up, and she had been written up. She was really well known back in the 80s. Her first book was 1947. But she died when she was 104 years old. And she died of pneumonia. And she was a real advocate of good health. And she talked, I always loved the last book. This was the last book she wrote because she shares so much. And she had talked about someone that she really liked and followed, which is Miracles Can Happen by C. Norman Shealy. She really wanted everybody to read that book. And I remember Shealy being so popular way back there. So I've gotten curious about him and amethyst. But she's always, her daughter said writing kept her young. And that's the way she believed, that writing kept her young. So there's something in our lives, no matter what it is, you're not too old. I keep hearing that, to do whatever it is that you want to do. Now, I told you I was going to share a story, and some of you've heard this. I think I may have shared it twice. I try not to repeat stories, but sometimes I just can't help it because this story fit into what I'm talking about. Most of you know I've had an ongoing saga with cars. You know, it just seems like, you know, as I started out with a new car that was a Jeep. I loved my Jeep, but after a while, you know, they break down and it's time for another car. And so I got my mother's car. My mother decided she wanted to not drive anymore. And so I bought her car. She didn't give it to me. I bought it. It was a Saturn, and it was okay for a while, but don't ask me to be an advocate of the Saturn company because there were things they had cardboard visors and things like that. And the car started just breaking down. I could not believe the felt came off the visor and it was nothing but cardboard. And, but at the same time, my grandson was in high school and he needed a car. And I wanted to give him a car, but I didn't see how I could. Well, then a friend of mine had a car that had 200,000 miles on it, and she offered to give it to me. And I thought, here's my opportunity. I can, you know, I paid her $100. I wouldn't just let her, but still a bargain as far as I'm concerned. So I bought the car from her, and I gave the car to my grandson that was a Saturn that belonged to my grandmother. So it had a meaning for him too, his grandmother. And so then the Saturn started having problems. just after I gave away a car that didn't have problems. It just had interior problems. And I thought I'd made a mistake. And then on top of that, I came to an intersection and a car didn't see me and ran right into the door. And the policeman told me I was lucky to be alive because it was an older car. It had a good door. It kept me safe. But I had no car. So now I went from a car to no car. And I didn't know what I was going to do. Well, it ended up that I got an insurance payment from that lady who hit me from her company. And I had just enough money to buy another car. And it was exact to the penny of what my insurance paid for. And for a year, it didn't need any work. So I ended up being able to give my grandson a car. And if it hadn't been for the accident, I wouldn't have gotten the insurance payment to get a car that didn't need anything for a while. And this car that I had bought for 200,000 miles was needing a lot of work. It was going to be like $2,000 because a lot of things needed replacing. So to me, that was a lesson for me personally, that you can end up wondering how you're going to get through with transportation, and things always seem to pop up for a better situation. I could go on and on with my car experiences, but to me, that is how life is. You go through one experience after another, and some of it is based on what you want. Like I wanted to give a car to my grandson, which started a whole cascade of things. So sometimes you need to look at what you want too. You know, you don't know sometimes what that might involve. And I wanted to quote from a letter that my dad had written to me in college when I was feeling so down. And I know people are dealing with depression, and I have read from this letter. I don't want to repeat again, but again, this is one that spoke to me so many times during my life. And he passed away in 1983, but I kept this letter, and he knew I was depressed. And I've read this, but just listen to it with fresh ears. Maybe it'll mean something different this time. And this was written on November 17th, 1968. He said, "I know that sometimes I felt like the soldier in Vietnam, although I never was in such a predicament literally, but it seemed like the war was going on forever and that I would never be able to live a normal life." Is that how you feel nowadays? Doesn't this feel like it's going on forever and that you will never live a normal life? But in looking back, the war only lasted 4 years, but it seemed an eternity. At that time, I would never have agreed with me being in the Army, but in retrospect, I know that there was good. For one thing, never again will anyone ever be able to tell me, or will I feel that all is lost, and that just because something I may be experiencing at the moment will continue or get worse, or that just because I happen to be experiencing something that is bad to me, that I was singled out to be the butt of some huge misfortune, or that the creator of the universe was playing a joke on me. I could name a near endless list of things that I feel benefited me from my experience. But the greatest is that I met and married Audrey, which was my mother. He met her through the war experience. That alone made up for everything else. Also, it was a test of everything I believe in and think about. Everyone has such testing, and whether we like it or not, there is no growth without testing, trying our stamina under the most trying of conditions. The worse the conditions or the more stress, the more opportunities for advancement. This doesn't mean that every time you get into what appears to be a bad situation that you should enjoy it, but regardless of what it is that you experience from the objective viewpoint, it will pass. This will pass. This too shall pass. And you should gain insight how to deal with another similar situation should the occasion arise. So I'll end with that. He had a long letter on that, but it's the idea that out of an adverse situation, a lot of good can come. And he had a club foot and he was in the Army, but he was in the FAA, and that became his lifelong career. And he met my mother. So out of some adverse situations, a lot of good can come. And I know we've all, if you really look back at life, you can find something like that. And we can all go into this experience and know that good can come no matter where we're at. And really, it's through some of these adverse situations that we find our spiritual self. So I'm going to end with that. And can you end the recording? And I'm going to play a song.